The cantina had grown quiet around them, but not empty. Other patrons remained, nursing their drinks and their memories. Zektar noticed how many different species sat together now: Vorthak, human, Altarian, and others. All of them veterans, all of them carrying pieces of the same war. The peace, he said slowly, was harder than the fighting. The journalist looked surprised. How can peace be harder than war? War gives you clear enemies. Peace forces you to face what you've become. Zektar gestured around the cantina. Look at us. Former enemies drinking together. It should be simple, right? The shooting stopped, so we moved on. He shook his head. But the human who saved your life yesterday is the same human who killed your friend last week. How do you process that? How do you shake hands with someone who can look at your scars and remember putting them there? The journalist followed his gaze around the room. She began to notice the subtle tensions, the way certain groups sat apart, the careful politeness, the unspoken boundaries. The armistice was signed on a neutral station much like this one. I was there, representing what was left of my unit. The humans sent their delegation too. We sat across from each other at a conference table, trying to pretend we were diplomats instead of killers. Zektar's cybernetic fingers drummed against his glass. The hardest part wasn't negotiating terms. It was looking at their faces, really seeing them for the first time as individuals instead of enemy soldiers. What did you see? Exhaustion. The same bone-deep tiredness we all carried. But also something else. Relief. They were as tired of killing as we were of dying. He paused. And fear. They were afraid of what came next. The humans were afraid, terrified. They'd spent years becoming perfect weapons. Now they had to become people again. Citizens, neighbors. They had to go home and explain to their families what they'd done, what they'd become. The journalist made notes, but more slowly. This story felt different from the others. The signing ceremony was supposed to be formal, dignified, but something happened that nobody expected. Zektar smiled slightly. One of the human delegates started crying, not quietly sobbing, shaking with grief. What triggered it? A moment of recognition. He looked across the table and saw a Vorthak delegate he'd fought against, face to face instead of through weapon sights, and he realized that every enemy he'd killed had been someone's son, daughter, parent, friend. Zektar's voice became softer. The Vorthak delegate, it was Commander Thekval. He got up from his chair. We thought he was going to attack the human. Instead, he walked around the table and put his hand on the human's shoulder. Just stood there while the human cried. What did he say? Nothing. That was the power of it. No words could bridge what had happened between us. But that simple gesture of recognition, of shared grief, it was the real armistice. The papers we signed later were just making it official. The cantina's ambient noise seemed different now, less like isolated groups and more like a community processing shared trauma. The first year of peace was chaos, not violent chaos, emotional chaos. Nobody knew how to act. There were humans and coalition species living on the same worlds, working in the same facilities but unable to trust each other. How did people cope? Badly at first. There were incidents. Old hatreds flaring up, veterans on both sides struggling with survivors' guilt and rage and confusion. Some people couldn't handle the transition. We lost more than a few to suicide in those early months. The journalist stopped writing. I didn't know that. It's not in the official histories. Both sides preferred to focus on the success stories. But the truth is, peace almost failed in the first year. We came close to returning to war several times. Zektar stood and walked to the cantina's memorial wall. Names covered the surface, beings, who had died in various conflicts. The turning point came during the reconstruction of Zirion Prime, the hospital, where I met Dr. Chen had been completely destroyed in the final battle. Both sides agreed to rebuild it together as a symbol of cooperation. How did that work? Terribly at first. Human and Vorthak construction crews working side by side but barely speaking. Every decision became an argument. Whose architectural style to use? What materials to employ? Even what color to paint the walls. Zektar traced a name on the memorial wall with his finger. Then one of the human workers found something in the rubble. A piece of debris from the children's ward. One of those drawings I told you about, somehow it had survived. What was the drawing of? A house, like Dr. Chen had described. Too many windows. Drawn by a Vorthak child before the war started. The human worker brought it to the construction site and asked what we should do with it. The journalist waited, sensing the importance of this moment. Nobody knew what to say. It was just a piece of paper with crayon marks, but it represented everything we'd destroyed and everything we were trying to rebuild. One of the Vorthak workers suggested framing it. A human suggested making copies for everyone. Zektar returned to his seat. Instead, we did something better. We used it as inspiration. The new hospital was designed to let in as much light as possible. Windows everywhere, skylights, glass corridors, a building that practically glowed. And that helped people work together. Working toward something beautiful instead of just functional gave us common ground. We weren't just humans and Vorthak anymore. We were people trying to create something that honored both our losses and our hopes. The cantina felt warmer somehow, as if the story was generating actual heat. The reconstruction project became a model for other cooperation efforts. Mixed crews, shared goals, focus on creation instead of past destruction. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still difficulties, but it was progress. What about the veterans? How did they adjust? Some better than others. The ones who found new purposes adapted faster. Former soldiers becoming teachers, engineers, artists. People who could channel their intensity into building instead of destroying. Zektar gestured around the cantina. Places like this help too. Neutral ground where former enemies could meet as equals. Share stories. Process trauma together. Realize that everyone had scars. Is that why you agreed to tell me these stories? Partly, but also because I think it's important for your generation to understand what peace actually costs. It's not the absence of conflict. It's the daily choice to be better than our worst impulses. The journalist looked at her notes. Pages of testimony about human capabilities, human choices, human contradictions. What do you want people to know about humans? Zektar considered the question carefully. That they're dangerous. Not just because they're good at fighting, but because they're good at changing. They can become whatever the situation demands. Warriors, healers, builders, destroyers. And that's frightening. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. They could choose to become conquerors tomorrow. They have the capability, but they choose not to. Every day, millions of humans wake up and choose to be better than their potential for destruction. The journalist closed her notebook. One last question. Do you trust them? I trust them to be exactly what they choose to be in any given moment. If they choose to be my friend, they'll be the most loyal friend imaginable. If they choose to be my enemy, he touched his cybernetic arm. Well, you've heard those stories. Zektar raised his glass and the gesture rippled through the cantina. Other patrons, human and non-human alike, raised their drinks as well. To humanity, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. May they never again need to show the universe what they're truly capable of. And may we never forget that they choose every day not to. The toast was echoed throughout the cantina. Different voices, different languages, but the same sentiment. As the evening wound down, the journalist packed up her equipment. Thank you, she said, for all of it. For the truth. The truth isn't always comfortable, but it's necessary. Zektar stood to leave. What will you do with these stories? Share them. Help people understand that peace isn't an accident. It's a choice we make every day. Zektar nodded approval. Then maybe some good will come from all that darkness. As he walked toward the exit, he paused at a table where a human veteran sat alone. The man looked up, recognized Zektar despite the years, and nodded slightly. Zektar nodded back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. They were former enemies who had chosen to become something better. Veterans of a war that had ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The journalist watched this interaction, then looked around the cantina one more time. She saw former enemies sharing drinks, swapping stories, caring for each other's wounds, literal and metaphorical. This was humanity's greatest victory, she realized. Not the battles they'd won, but the peace they'd chosen to build afterward. The daily decision to be better than their capacity for destruction. Outside the cantina, human and coalition ships moved together through space in perfect formation. Peaceful, cooperative, choosing, every day to build instead of destroy. The war was over. The work of peace would never end, and that perhaps was exactly as it should be. 6 months after the series meeting, Chief Engineer Sarah Kim wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at her latest creation. To anyone watching the security feeds, She was supervising the construction of mining platform Delta 7, a standard asteroid processing facility. The official report showed normal progress on ore refinement systems and cargo handling equipment. What the reports didn't show was the military-grade armor being installed behind false walls, or the weapon systems disguised as mining lasers, or the fighter bay hidden inside what appeared to be a simple cargo hold. "Sarah, we've got company," came Marcus's voice over her headset. "Krathari inspection team just dropped out of FTL. They'll be here in 2 hours." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Krathari inspections were supposed to be routine, but they always made her nervous. One wrong move, one component left in the wrong place, and everything would be over. "Beginning rotation sequence," she announced to her crew. Around her, the asteroid facility began to transform. The brilliant thing about Dr. Chen's design was that it was modular. The entire interior of the asteroid could rotate on massive bearing assemblies, originally designed for mining operations. In 30 minutes, the military construction bays would be hidden behind false walls lined with actual mining equipment. The weapons assembly areas would become ore processing centers. The fighter construction zone would look like a standard vehicle maintenance bay. As the rotation completed, Sarah checked her chronometer. 27 minutes. They were getting better at this. The Krathari shuttle docked exactly on schedule. Inspector Thakmor was a typical Krathari officer, tall and imposing with dark scales and permanently suspicious eyes. He had conducted 3 previous inspections of human facilities, and each time he seemed disappointed to find nothing wrong. "Chief Engineer Kim," Thakmor rumbled in his deep voice, "I trust your mining operations continue to meet Confederation standards." "Of course, Inspector. Would you like to see our production reports?" "I prefer to see actual operations. Show me your ore processing center." Sarah led him through corridors lined with legitimate mining equipment. As they walked, she could hear the faint hum of machinery from the hidden sections just meters away. Behind those false walls, teams of workers were putting the finishing touches on the first human frigate in over 40 years. The ore processing center was impressive because it was real. Massive refinement units broke down asteroid material into useful metals and rare elements. The only difference was that these particular units could be reconfigured as weapon-focusing arrays with about 6 hours of work. "Your efficiency ratings are quite high," Thakmor observed, studying his scanner readings. "Human engineering," Sarah replied with a smile. "We like to build things that work well." "Indeed. And what is the purpose of this equipment?" He pointed to a large assembly that looked like industrial fabrication machinery. "Component assembly for mining platforms. We build everything here rather than shipping parts from Earth. Much more efficient." It was true as far as it went. They were building components for mining platforms. The fact that those platforms could reconfigure themselves into warships wasn't mentioned in the official documentation. Thakmor spent 2 more hours examining the facility. He tested the ore samples, reviewed the production logs, and even watched a live demonstration of the mining laser systems. Sarah operated the controls herself, showing how the focused energy beams could cut through solid rock with precision. What the inspector didn't know was that those same energy beams, properly focused and amplified, could punch through the armor of a Krathari destroyer. "Everything appears to be in order," Thakmor finally announced. "Your operations are adequate." After the Krathari shuttle departed, Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief. Then she activated the rotation sequence again. In 30 minutes, the military construction bays would be accessible once more, and work could continue on humanity's secret fleet. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. On 17 different asteroid facilities, teams of engineers and workers were building something that shouldn't exist. Each facility specialized in different components to avoid detection. Site Alpha built engines and power systems. Site Gamma focused on weapons and defensive systems. Site Theta constructed the massive structural frameworks that would become ship hulls. The work was dangerous in more ways than one. Beyond the risk of discovery, the construction itself pushed human engineering to its limits. They were building ships that had to function as both civilian vessels and military craft, often switching between roles in minutes. The mechanical complexity was staggering. Elena Vasquez, now serving as overall coordinator for the project, visited each facility regularly. Her official role was logistics coordinator for the Colonial Mining Consortium. Unofficially, she was ensuring that humanity's secret fleet would be ready when it was needed. The first completed vessel was a frigate-class ship, designated as Escort Mining Platform Perseus. To external scanners, it appeared to be exactly what its name suggested, a mid-sized mining vessel designed to escort cargo ships through dangerous asteroid fields. The massive drilling assemblies on its hull looked perfectly normal for breaking up large rocks. Those same drilling assemblies could deploy as close-range, kinetic weapons in combat situations. Dr. Chen had outdone himself with the Perseus design. The ship could reconfigure its external structure in less than 15 minutes, shifting from mining configuration to combat readiness. Cargo bays became fighter launch tubes. Processing equipment became weapon arrays. Even the navigation deflector could be modified into a powerful sensor jamming system. "It's beautiful," Elena said, standing on the observation deck of Site Alpha as the Perseus completed its first test flight. "It's functional," Dr. Chen replied. "Beauty is secondary to survival." The Perseus was just the beginning. Over the following months, more ships joined the secret fleet. Destroyers disguised as deep space salvage vessels, heavy cruisers masquerading as mobile processing platforms, and the crown jewel of the fleet, 3 massive dreadnought-class ships that officially didn't exist at all. The dreadnoughts were too large to hide their construction, so Dr. Chen had taken a different approach. They were built as mobile asteroid mining facilities, massive ships designed to move from system to system processing entire asteroid belts. The Confederation approved the construction permits without question. After all, what could be more harmless than a mining ship? Elena stood on the bridge of the first dreadnought, officially designated Mobile Mining Platform Terra's Vengeance. The bridge looked like any civilian vessel command center, with mining operation displays and cargo management systems. But hidden panels could be activated to reveal military tactical displays and weapon control systems. "Status, report," she called to her crew. "All systems functioning normally," reported Marcus from the engineering station. "Ore processing arrays ready for deployment. Fighter bays loaded and ready," added Jake from what appeared to be the mining vehicle coordination station. "Communications array active. We're monitoring all Confederation frequencies," Sarah reported from her position. Elena nodded. They were as ready as they could be. Across human space, 17 hidden facilities had produced a fleet of 43 vessels, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and 3 dreadnoughts, all of them officially civilian ships, engaged in legitimate mining and cargo operations, all of them capable of standing up to the Crathery fleet when the time came, and Elena was beginning to suspect that time was approaching faster than anyone expected. Intelligence reports from their growing network of contacts suggested that more human colonies were being targeted. The attacks were getting bolder, more frequent. "Captain," Sarah called from her station, "I'm picking up coded transmissions from our contacts in the New Harvest system. They're reporting unusual Crathari fleet movements in nearby sectors." Elena felt a familiar chill. New Harvest was one of humanity's most successful agricultural colonies, supplying food to dozens of systems. It would be a tempting target for anyone looking to cripple human expansion. "How long until we can deploy the fleet?" she asked Dr. Chen. The old engineer consulted his datapad. The Perseus and her escorts could be ready in 48 hours. Terra's Vengeance would need 72 hours to complete final system checks. Elena made her decision. "Begin preparations for fleet deployment, and send word to all our people in the New Harvest system. Tell them to be ready for anything." She didn't know it yet, but the Crathari were already preparing their own fleet movements. The trap was about to be sprung, and humanity's secret fleet was about to face its first real test. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could build when they really put their minds to it. The intelligence came from an unexpected source. Zethka, a young Delphinian trader, had always been friendly to humans. Unlike most galactic species, the Delphinarians were small, peaceful, and often bullied by larger powers. They understood what it meant to be helpless. Zethka found Elena at a supply station near the rim of human space. His 4-armed, blue-skinned form moved nervously as he approached her table in the station's cantina. "Captain Vasquez," he said quietly, "I have information you need to hear." Elena gestured for him to sit. The Delphinian looked around carefully before speaking. "My cousin works in data processing for the Crathery Trade Commission. 3 days ago, he intercepted military communications that weren't properly encrypted." Zethka's large eyes were worried. The attack on New Geneva wasn't pirates. It was Crithari Special Operations testing new weapons. Elena felt her blood turn cold, but she kept her expression neutral. Why are you telling me this? Because New Harvest is next, and because the Delphinarian colonies might be after that. Zethka slid a data chip across the table. Everything my cousin could copy is on there. Fleet movements, target assessments, timeline estimates. After Zethka left, Elena studied the data in her ship's secure cabin. The intelligence was damning. The Crithari weren't just attacking random human colonies. They were systematically targeting the most successful settlements, the ones that proved humans could thrive without Crithari protection. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Create a crisis by destroying human colonies, then offer increased Crithari presence as the solution. Eventually, human space would become a Crithari protectorate, with all the resources flowing back to the Empire. Elena activated her encrypted communicator and sent word to Dr. Chen and the other fleet coordinators. Within hours, the response came back. Operation Harvest Shield is approved. Fleet deployment begins immediately. The Colonial Mining Consortium made their move with typical human efficiency. Official reports filed with the Confederation Trade Authority showed a major rare earth discovery in the New Harvest system. The deposits were so valuable that the consortium would be deploying their largest mobile mining platform, along with escort vessels and support craft. What the reports didn't mention was that mobile mining platform Terra's Vengeance was actually a Dreadnought-class warship carrying enough firepower to level a small. Moon Dr. Chen personally oversaw the final preparations. In the hidden bays of the asteroid facilities, ships that had spent months disguised as mining equipment revealed their true nature. External drilling arrays folded back to expose weapon mounts. Cargo bays reconfigured into fighter launch tubes. Sensor arrays deployed from hidden compartments. Elena stood on the bridge of Terra's Vengeance as the ship completed its transformation. Around her, 42 other vessels were undergoing similar changes. For the first time in decades, humanity had a battle fleet. All ships report ready for deployment, Marcus announced from the tactical station. Communications are monitoring all Crithari frequencies, Sarah added. No indication they suspect anything unusual. Elena took a deep breath. In a few hours, they would either save New Harvest or start a war that could destroy humanity. Either way, there was no going back. Signal the fleet. Jump in 30 minutes. The Crithari Warfleet Dominator dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Harvest system, exactly when Zethka's intelligence had predicted. Fleet Commander Graktor was confident this would be another easy operation. Humans had no military vessels, no way to fight back. The colony would be destroyed, the resources claimed, and another step toward Crithari domination would be complete. Commander, we're detecting ships in the inner system, reported his sensor operator. Colony evacuation vessels, no doubt, Graktor replied. Standard procedure. Destroy them first, then proceed with bombardment of the planet. But as the Crithari fleet moved deeper into the system, the sensor reports became confusing. The human ships weren't running. Instead, they were forming up in defensive positions around New Harvest. Commander, I'm reading some very large vessels among the human ships. The lead ship mass is nearly 4 million tons. Graktor frowned. That was larger than most Crithari battleships. Are you certain? Humans don't build ships that large. Confirmed, sir. Multiple large vessels plus smaller escorts. They appear to be mining ships? Mining ships. Graktor relaxed slightly. Even large industrial vessels would be helpless against his warfleet. All ships prepare for engagement. Standard bombardment pattern. That was when Elena's voice echoed across every communication frequency in the system. Crithari Warfleet Dominator, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force vessel Terra's Vengeance. You are in violation of human sovereign space. Withdraw immediately, or we will demonstrate why humans weren't permitted to build warships. For a moment, there was dead silence on the Crithari command deck. Then Graktor began to laugh. Terran Defense Force? Humans don't have a defense force. They have cargo ships and mining platforms. He opened a channel to Elena's ship. Human captain, you are outgunned by a factor of 10 to 1. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Elena's response was calm and professional. Commander Graktor, you are correct that humans weren't permitted to build warships. However, there was nothing in the Confederation treaties that prevented us from building very well-armed mining equipment. On Elena's bridge, Marcus was tracking the Crithari fleet movements. 47 ships total. 3 battleships, 12 heavy cruisers, 18 destroyers, and 14 frigates. They're moving into standard attack formation. Signal the fleet, Elena commanded. All ships reconfigure for combat operations. Launch all fighters. Across the human fleet, and transformation began that would be talked about in military academies for generations. Ships that had appeared to be simple industrial vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. The Perseus unfolded weapon arrays that had been disguised as mining equipment. The destroyer Humanity's Hammer deployed armor plates that converted its hull from a cargo configuration to a battleship profile. Dozens of small craft that had looked like mining shuttles emerged from hidden bays, revealing themselves as heavily armed fighters. On the Krathari flagship, the sensor operator's voice was filled with disbelief. "Commander, the human ships are changing. I'm reading massive increases in energy output and weapon signatures." Graktor stared at his tactical display as it updated with new information. The human mining fleet now showed as a legitimate military force. Those weren't cargo ships and industrial platforms. They were warships disguised so cleverly that even Krathari sensors had been fooled. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Elena's voice came over the communication channel again. "Commander, you have 10 seconds to begin your withdrawal. After that, we will consider your fleet hostile and respond accordingly." Graktor's pride wouldn't let him retreat from a bunch of humans no matter what ships they had.
"All vessels attack!"
Destroy the human fleet. The Battle of New Harvest began with the Krathari fleet charging forward in their traditional formation, confident that superior numbers would carry the day. What they encountered instead was something they had never faced before: human tactical innovation. The human ships didn't fight like any military force the Krathari had ever encountered. Instead of forming rigid battle lines, they moved like a living organism. Ships combined and separated as needed, adapting their formation in real time to changing battlefield conditions. The frigate Perseus suddenly split into 3 separate components, each attacking the Krathari formation from a different angle. The destroyer Humanity's Hammer reconfigured its hull mid-battle, shifting from a close combat configuration to long-range bombardment mode in less than 5 minutes. Most shocking of all was Terra's Vengeance itself. The massive dreadnought didn't just fight as a single ship. Parts of its hull detached to become independent combat units, while the main vessel continued firing. It was like fighting a warship that could grow and shrink as needed. "Commander, we're taking heavy casualties," reported the Krathari tactical officer. "The human weapons are more powerful than our intelligence suggested." Graktor watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart by ships that shouldn't exist.
How are they doing this?
How did they build a fleet without anyone knowing? Elena's fighters swarmed around the Krathari battleships like angry insects. Each small craft was equipped with weapons that could penetrate Krathari armor, and they attacked in coordinated groups that confused the enemy targeting systems. But the real revelation came when one of the Krathari heavy cruisers managed to inflict serious damage on the destroyer New Geneva's Revenge. Elena watched as the human ship's crew did something impossible. They rebuilt their vessel during combat. Modular components shifted and reconfigured. Damaged sections were ejected and replaced with backup systems, and within 20 minutes the destroyer was back to full combat effectiveness. "Commander Graktor," Elena broadcast, "your fleet is beaten. Order your ships to withdraw while you still can." The Krathari commander looked at his tactical display. Of his original 47 ships, 19 had been destroyed and another 15 were too damaged to continue fighting. The human fleet had lost only 3 vessels. The emergency session of the Supreme Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving news about the New Harvest battle. Representatives from 43 species gathered in the massive chamber on Confederation Prime, their voices creating a buzz of alarm and confusion that echoed off the crystal walls. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak of the Krathari Empire stood at the central podium, his dark scales gleaming under the chamber lights. His voice carried the authority of a species that had dominated galactic politics for over 2 centuries. "Fellow council members," he began, "we face an unprecedented crisis. The human species has violated the fundamental principles of the Pax Galactica Treaty by constructing military vessels in secret. This cannot be tolerated." Murmurs of agreement came from several delegations, but Elena noticed that not all species seemed convinced. The Delphinian representative was quietly conferring with colleagues, while the crystalline Vex collective delegates remained motionless, their internal communications invisible to organic species. Ambassador Rebecca Torres stood to address the council. She was humanity's chief legal representative, a sharp-minded woman who had spent years studying Confederation law.
Honorable Chancellor, if I may respond to these accusations?
Vorthak's eyes narrowed. The evidence is clear. Your species has built warships in direct violation of your classification as artisan traders. With respect, Rebecca replied, humans have built no warships. We have constructed mining platforms, cargo vessels, and industrial equipment, all properly registered with the Trade Authority and inspected by Crithari officials. Mining platforms that destroyed a Crithari warfleet. Rebecca smiled. Mining platforms that defended themselves when attacked by an illegal military operation targeting civilian colonies. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began arguing among themselves. Vorthak slammed his ceremonial staff against the podium. Order! The human vessels clearly possessed military capabilities. Indeed they did, Rebecca agreed. Just as Crithari cargo ships carry defensive weapons, and Vex collective research vessels are equipped with powerful energy systems. The difference is that human engineering makes our civilian vessels particularly effective at self-defense, Elena watched from the observation gallery as Rebecca systematically dismantled the Crithari legal position. The human lawyer had prepared for this moment, studying every treaty and regulation that governed galactic civilization. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Dr. Chen's design team has provided complete technical specifications for all human vessels to the Trade Authority. Every component, every system, every capability was properly documented and filed under civilian vessel classifications. The Delphinian representative, Speaker Yethma, raised a tentacle to request recognition. If I may address the council? The Delphinian Republic has reviewed the human technical documentation. Their modular construction methods are innovative but clearly civilian in nature. The ability to reconfigure for defensive purposes is not prohibited by any existing treaty. Vorthak's frustration was becoming obvious. The intent was clearly military. These ships were designed to fight. The intent, Rebecca replied calmly, was to protect human colonies from pirate attacks, which, according to Crithari fleet logs recently made available to us, were actually Crithari military operations disguised as criminal activity. The accusation sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the chamber. Elena smiled grimly. Zethka's intelligence had been even more valuable than they'd realized. The Vex collective prime node finally spoke, its crystalline voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the chamber. This unit has analyzed the human vessel configurations. The mathematical elegance of their modular design suggests optimization for multiple functions, not deception. The Vex collective finds the human approach aesthetically pleasing. Coming from the Vex, that was practically a glowing endorsement. The crystalline species rarely expressed approval of organic engineering. As the debate continued, Elena noticed that the galaxy was dividing along unexpected lines. The warlike species that had always dominated Confederation politics were condemning humanity, but many of the smaller, peaceful species were expressing support or at least understanding. Ambassador Quintal of the Energy Collective spoke in patterns of light that required translation. The Energy Collective observes that the current classification system restricts species development based on arbitrary cultural assessments. Perhaps this system requires adjustment. Elena felt a surge of hope. The Energy Collective was one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in the galaxy. Their support could change everything, but Vorthak wasn't finished. Even if the human ships were technically legal, which we dispute, their actions at New Harvest constitute an act of war against the Crithari Empire. We demand immediate disarmament and reparations. Rebecca's response was swift and devastating. The Crithari fleet attacked a human colony and civilian shipping without provocation. Under Confederation law, humans had every right to defend themselves. If the Empire considers that an act of war, then the Empire has declared war on humanity, not the reverse. The legal implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the Crithari officially declared war on humanity, other species would be forced to choose sides under various mutual defense treaties. Elena's communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Dr. Chen. Fleet deployment complete. All ships ready. The old engineer had been busy during the council debates. While politicians argued in the chambers of Confederation Prime, human mining vessels had taken positions throughout human space and beyond. If the Krithari wanted a war, they would find humanity ready for one. Speaker Yethma requested recognition again. The Delphinian Republic moves that the Council formally recognize the right of all species to construct vessels capable of self-defense, regardless of their primary classification. The motion was seconded by the Energy Collective and supported by 7 other species. Elena realized that humanity's actions had opened a door that had been closed for centuries. The rigid classification system that kept warrior races in charge was finally being challenged. Vorthak saw the political tide turning against him. Very well. If the Council will not act, the Krithari Empire will defend galactic order itself. We invoke Article 15 of the Mutual Defense Compact. Elena felt her blood chill. Article 15 allowed a member species to call for military support from allied civilizations when faced with an existential threat to galactic stability. If enough species answered the call, humanity could face a coalition fleet that would dwarf anything they could build. But Rebecca was ready for this too. Ambassador Torres requests immediate recognition under Article 12. Article 12 was rarely used, but Elena knew what it meant. When a species faced potential extinction, they could demand a formal review of their status and rights within the Confederation. It was designed to prevent stronger species from wiping out weaker ones. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity was essentially declaring that they faced genocide if they remained defenseless, and asking for protection under the most fundamental laws of galactic civilization. Prime Speaker Velton of the Ancient Wisdom Keepers slowly rose from their meditation platform. The Wisdom Keepers rarely spoke in council sessions, but when they did, everyone listened. This chamber has heard arguments about law and classification and treaty obligations, the ancient being said in a voice like wind through crystal caverns. But the fundamental question is simple. Should any species be forbidden the right to defend itself? The question hung in the air as delegates considered their response. Elena realized that humanity had forced the galaxy to confront a basic moral issue that had been ignored for too long. The Wisdom Keepers propose a new framework, Velton continued. Let all species possess the right to construct defensive vessels appropriate to their needs and capabilities. Let the old classifications be advisory rather than restrictive. Let the galaxy move beyond the artificial hierarchies that have divided us for too long. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Species argued, formed coalitions, broke apart, and reformed around new positions. Elena watched it all from the observation gallery, knowing that humanity's future hung in the balance. Finally, the vote was called. The motion to reform the classification system and recognize universal defense rights passed by a narrow margin. 23 species in favor, 18 opposed with 2 abstentions. Vorthak's reaction was immediate and predictable. The Krithari Empire does not recognize this illegal vote. We withdraw from council proceedings pending restoration of proper galactic order. 7 other species followed the Krithari out of the chamber, their delegates filing past Elena with expressions of anger and disgust. Elena realized that humanity had won a political victory, but at the cost of splitting the galaxy in 2. As the council session ended, Rebecca joined Elena in the observation gallery. Well, we're legal now, the lawyer said with a tired smile. The question is whether that matters if half the galaxy wants to destroy us. Elena looked out at the scattered delegates, some celebrating, others plotting in small groups. The political battle was over, but she suspected the real war was just beginning. Dr. Chen's fleet is ready, she told Rebecca. The war began not with a formal declaration, but with ships simply disappearing. Human cargo vessels went missing in supposedly safe space. Research stations went silent without explanation. Colony supply runs never reached their destinations. Elena stood in the command center of Terra's Vengeance, now openly acknowledged as the flagship of the Terran Defense Force. The massive dreadnought hung in space above Earth, its modular armor gleaming in the light of humanity's home star. Around it, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, prepared for what might be their final battle. Fleet status report, Elena called to her bridge crew. 87 human vessels ready for deployment, Marcus replied from the tactical station. That includes 12 ships completed since the council vote, plus volunteer crews on converted civilian vessels. Elena nodded. In the months since the political crisis, human shipyards had worked around the clock. The secrecy was gone, so there was no need to hide their construction efforts anymore. Mining platforms became heavy cruisers. Cargo haulers sprouted weapon arrays. Even scientific research vessels had been modified for combat. But it might not be enough. Enemy fleet composition? She asked. Sarah looked up from her sensor station with a grim expression. 3 separate task forces approaching the Sol system. Krathari Empire fleet numbers 68 ships, including 5 battleships. The Hegemony Coalition has 43 vessels. The Purity Alliance is bringing 37 ships. Elena felt her stomach clench. 148 enemy ships against humanity's 87. The odds were bad, but not impossible. What worried her more was the political situation. Any word from our allies? The Delphinian Republic is sending their entire fleet, all 14 ships. The Energy Collective has dispatched 23 vessels. The Vex Collective Prime Node indicates they will provide mathematical support, whatever that means. Elena smiled grimly. Humanity had allies, but they were mostly smaller species with limited military capability. The major galactic powers had chosen sides based on their own interests, and most had decided that humanity was too dangerous to survive. Dr. Chen entered the command center, moving slowly, but with determination. The old engineer had insisted on being present for the final battle, despite Elena's concerns about his health. Fleet modifications are complete, he reported. All ships have been upgraded with the new modular combat systems. We're as ready as we can be. The new systems were Dr. Chen's latest innovation, developed in the desperate months after the Council crisis. Human ships could now combine and separate not just their hull components but their entire vessels. Frigates could link together to form heavy cruisers. Destroyers could merge into makeshift battleships. It was a completely new approach to space warfare. Long-range sensors are detecting the lead elements of the enemy fleet, Sarah announced. First contact in approximately 4 hours. Elena took a deep breath. This was it. Everything humanity had worked for, everything they had built, would be tested in the next few hours. Signal all civilian vessels to begin evacuation to the outer system. Military vessels, assume defensive positions around Earth and Mars, and send a message to our friends out there. She turned to address the communication system directly. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force, broadcasting to all Allied vessels. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for the right of all species to determine their own destiny. Today we prove that the strong cannot simply dictate terms to the weak. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far. The response came back immediately from dozens of ships, human vessels, Delphinian cruisers, Energy Collective Guardians, and even a few Vex Collective geometric forms that defied easy classification. They might be outnumbered, but they weren't alone. The enemy fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system in perfect coordination. Elena had to admire their tactical precision, even as she prepared to destroy them. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. Remember your training. Remember why we're here, and remember that the galaxy is watching. The battle for Earth began with long-range missile exchanges as both fleets tested each other's defenses. The Krathari opened with their traditional bombardment pattern, expecting human ships to respond in kind. Instead, Elena's fleet did something completely unexpected. They scattered. Rather than forming traditional battle lines, human ships spread throughout the inner solar system in small groups. Some took position near Earth's moon, others moved to the asteroid belt. A few even dove close to the sun itself, using solar radiation to mask their signatures. What are they doing? Demanded Krathari Fleet Commander Graktor from his flagship. This isn't how space battles are fought. He was right by traditional standards. For thousands of years, galactic warfare had followed predictable patterns. Fleets met in open space, formed battle lines, and hammered each other until one side broke. But humans had never read those tactical manuals. Elena watched her plot as enemy ships moved deeper into the system, clearly confused by the human deployment. All units execute Constellation Protocol. Across the solar system, human ships began to move with purpose. But instead of converging on the enemy, they began linking together. 3 frigates docked with each other to form a heavy cruiser configuration. 5 destroyers combined into a makeshift battleship. Even some of the converted civilian vessels joined together to create mobile fortresses. The enemy fleet suddenly found themselves facing not 87 individual ships, but 23 massive combined vessels, each one larger and more powerful than anything in their intelligence reports. "Impossible," whispered Graktor as his sensors updated with the new threat assessment. "Ships can't just combine like that." "Human ships can," Elena replied over the open communication channel. "We told you we built very good mining equipment. We just never mentioned that it comes apart and goes back together." The real shock came when the combined human vessels opened fire. Each weapon system had been designed to work not just individually, but as part of a larger array. When ships linked together, their firepower didn't just add up, it multiplied. The improvised battleship formed from 5 destroyers hit a Krathari heavy cruiser with the combined output of 15 normal ships. The enemy vessels simply vaporized, but the humans weren't finished. As the enemy fleet tried to adapt to fighting the combined vessels, Elena gave her next order. "All civilian volunteers begin support operations." This was the part that really confused the enemy. Hundreds of civilian ships that had been evacuating to the outer system suddenly reversed course and headed back toward the battle. Cargo haulers, research vessels, even passenger liners joined the fight. They didn't engage the enemy directly. Instead, they performed functions that no military manual had ever considered. Cargo ships docked with damaged warships to provide emergency repairs. Research vessels used their sensors to coordinate targeting for entire fleet groups. Even passenger liners contributed, their communication systems linking human ships into a network that shared information in real time. Elena watched in amazement as her fleet began fighting as a single organism. Ships combined and separated as needed, sharing weapons, power, crew, and even hull components. When the destroyer Humanity's Hope took critical damage, its crew evacuated to a nearby cargo ship while automated systems transferred the destroyer's weapons to 3 frigates that suddenly found themselves equipped with heavy cruiser firepower. The Delphinian and Energy Collective ships tried to adopt similar tactics, but their vessels weren't designed for it. Only human modular technology allowed this kind of real-time reconfiguration. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," Sarah reported with amazement in her voice. "We've destroyed 47 ships and damaged dozens more. Our losses are minimal." Elena could hardly believe it. The combined enemy fleet, which had outnumbered them significantly, was running away after losing a third of their ships. Human casualties were incredibly light, thanks to the ability to evacuate crews from damaged vessels and redistribute their capabilities to other ships. "All ships, pursuit course, but maintain formation." This could be a trick. It wasn't a trick. The enemy fleets retreated all the way to the edge of the system before jumping to faster-than-light travel. As the last enemy ship disappeared, a cheer went up from every human vessel in the fleet. Elena allowed herself a moment of relief before addressing her fleet. "Attention all vessels. The immediate threat is over, but this war isn't finished. They'll be back with more ships and better tactics." Dr. Chen appeared at her side, his eyes bright with satisfaction. "Let them come. We've proven something today that the galaxy will never forget." "What's that?" "That the best weapon isn't the biggest gun or the thickest armor. It's the willingness to try something nobody's ever done before." Over the following months, the war continued, but the balance had shifted permanently. Human fleets appeared throughout the galaxy, protecting not just human colonies but any species that asked for help. The modular ship technology spread to their allies, creating a new kind of warfare that the traditional powers couldn't match.